All right, good. That way we can share this with everyone at the end. Okay. All right, great. There we go. Okay, so as we get going here, I just want to introduce what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to introduce myself because I know some of you know me really, really well, and some of you have probably already heard my story, and some of you have never met me before and probably don't even follow me on social media, so you might know nothing about me. Maybe a friend invited you, maybe you just recently connected. So I'm going to just do a quick introduction, share a little bit about my story, why I'm passionate about gut health, the things that I have experienced and learned. And then we're going to dig right into it. We're going to talk about what the heck is gut health, what is the importance of hormone balance. Then we're going to go into what are the three main things that are stressors that contribute to imbalances in your gut health and your hormones. And then, of course, what does that turn into? What's the fallout of those stressors? What happens when these things pile up and cause sort of a cascade in our bodies? And then, of course, I don't want to leave you without tools, so we're going to talk about what to do about it. And they're going to be simple steps and simple tools that you can take away. And then I'm really excited to introduce my brand new Hormone Hacker program. It's something that I have been working on. I'm still working on it, but it's officially starting in September. I'm super pumped to bring this to you guys. So we're going to introduce that really quickly. And then, of course, I have some fun giveaways and some question and answer time at the end for any of your questions. So again, you guys have just joined me. Make sure that you can get to the Facebook group. I have posted a picture there where you can start a conversation with questions during the webinar, and that way at the end I can get to those as well. And I already have one. I see people taking notes. That's great. Love it, love it. Okay, all right, let's get started. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. You guys, my name is Kylene Terhune. I'm a certified personal trainer, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and a certified autoimmune protocol coach. So basically, my main focus is the FDN practitioner, and what that means is that it's my job to work with my clients to discover underlying health conditions and causes for chronic health conditions that they're struggling with. So I work with people that have, obviously, gut health is my specialty. So gut health issues, hormone imbalances, autoimmune conditions, and we really work to uncover what's going on in their bodies. But, I really went through my own journey with this myself. So I've struggled with hormone imbalance and gut health for a long time. And on the top left there, you see me at my heaviest weight. That was around 2007. So I was really in what I would consider the prime of my life, right? I was early 20s when you should have like this amazing metabolism and eat whatever you want. But I was gaining weight and I had a lot of health issues in my late teens and through my mid 20s. And, I gained a lot of weight when I went to college, and I pretty much ate whatever I wanted, but that was the result. So when I came home a few years later, I naturally lost some weight. My mom was pretty health conscious, and she actually introduced me to the concept of being gluten-free. And I remember we were sitting at dinner one day, and I was like, what the heck is that? And why would you ever do it? I was what you would call maybe like a breadaholic, you guys. I was the kind of person that was like, we're going to Bravo for dinner. Why do we even bother ordering the dinner? Because breadsticks is the main meal. So I thought that, giving up gluten was crazy. And she's like, well, here, I'm reading this book about it. Why don't you read it? And that was it for me. I was on like chapter 3, and I told my husband, my boyfriend at the time, I was like, hey, honey, I think we need to try this. And he was a good sport. And that was the beginning of my health journey. But we began to make some changes from there. And I really started seeing amazing results. And it just really stimulated my interest in nutrition and the effect that it has on your body. And so I started doing more research. And I began to then switch from eating all the processed gluten-free foods, because initially I went from, regular Oreos straight over to gluten-free Oreos. And so eventually I started making the transition to whole foods living. I discovered the paleo diet. And when I started making these changes, I really started noticing that it was easier to maintain my weight. I started bouncing out of bed, with energy. And so there were a lot of benefits, and it was different for everyone in my family, but we all experienced different things. But throughout my late teens and mid 20s, like I said, I did struggle with a myriad of health problems. I had, before I went to college, I had these extreme stomach pains where I would double over at work, and it would really incapacitate me. I would have to go home. I would take a lot of painkillers. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know if it was an ulcer. I didn't know, what was going on. And so those actually affected me for quite a while. On and off for 10, 15 years, I had about really horrible periods. I mean, to the point where I was writhing on the floor, literally wanting to die, texting my husband, come kill me now because this is so awful. My family got so used to it that, we would only go to the emergency room for painkillers in like the most extreme situation. And they were basically like, hey, you just kind of let her, writhe it out for about 4 hours until it goes away. So extreme excruciating pain and imbalances. And so, throughout this period, obviously you see there on the top right, I did go through a phase where I gained a lot of weight. Eventually I was diagnosed with rosacea. And one of the first things that really got me interested in researching health was the fact that I was crazy fatigued all the time. I was just a total mess. So like I said, when we began to change our diets, primarily when we went gluten-free, we saw a ton of results, but I was still struggling, like I said, with fatigue. I got married to my wonderful husband and we were health focused, but then around 2013, 14, I had like 3 UTIs in a year, you guys. It was just awful and miserable and just, uncomfortable. So I went through rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics in the course of about 1 year. And in 2015, my body ended up totally crashing. So I don't know if I can go back on this. The slide prior, you saw that I had that like physique picture in the bottom right. And that's when I had decided to do a little physique competition. Well, that was in 2016. In 2015, I had totally crashed, like in August of 2015. Mental, emotional, physical crash. For whatever reason, my body had decided that it had enough. And I spent 2 weeks of complete insomnia, extreme anxiety, panic attacks, crying all day, every day. And all my doctor wanted to do was give me an antidepressant. I didn't know what I know now, but I did know enough that I knew that I wasn't depressed and that wasn't the answer. And so I asked her, I said, hey, should you check my hormones? And she said, no, if you're having your periods regularly, that's not a problem. And so she just wanted to prescribe me an antidepressant and send me on my way. So, somebody is on here. Hold on just a second. I want to make sure everybody can hear. I'm going to make sure. Oh, it's hard for me to get this. There we go. There we go. Okay. I think somebody new popped on, so I'm going to mute you real quick. Sorry. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So, in 2015, I completely crashed, and my doctor really had no answers for me whatsoever. And so I ended up doing my own research, and I was like, well, she doesn't want to test me for hormones, but I just have this feeling that, that might be what's going on. So I decided to do my own research. I did my own testing. And I discovered I was in my early 20s and walking around with postmenopausal level hormones. I mean, they were all completely crashed. My cortisol was low. My sex hormones were non-existent. And so I did get some symptom relief at that time, and I continued to dig and learn more. And so when I became an FDN, I started learning more about how the body works and what affects the body. And so then the next year, in 2015, I did do that physique competition, which looking back was like probably the worst thing I could have done for myself because, I was increasing my exercise, which is a major stressor on your body. I was super low carb. I was super low fat by the time it got to the competition. I was moody. I was tired. And that was just a huge stress on my body that during a period of time where I was still trying to recover. Essentially, it was like 8 months later. So fast forward a few years here on this slide, you see that I've learned to dig to the root causes. I'm a mom, a stepmom, I'm a dog mom, I'm an aunt to that little cutie on the left there. And, I am energetic. I'm able to get out of bed. I am a certified trainer. I'm an FDN. I've been through all this training, and essentially I feel really, really great, better than I did in my early 20s, even though I have more stressors in my life. But I've learned how to prioritize my health and dig to the root cause and focus on my sleep and my nutrition and give my body a break. So one thing this is probably a really personal information, but because you are all here and interested in hormones and learning about these things, I wanted to share. One of the things I noticed recently is that I have been ovulating regularly, like every single month. And so it's funny because sometimes you don't even realize that something is gone until it comes back. Or sometimes it's hard to realize like what feeling good feels like until you feel good, right? Like you don't even realize sometimes how bad you feel until you feel awesome. And so when I started ovulating regularly, I was like, you know what? I'm not sure I did that for about 10 years of my life, which is crazy. Like in your 20s when you should be super fertile and super healthy, that should have been happening regularly for me. And I'm not sure that it was. And so that's just one thing that has changed in a long list of things that have changed. So let's get to the topics that really affect you. I know you're here to learn about gut health and hormones. Hey, Teresa, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Can you see me or I just can see you?
I can see you. Can you go ahead and mute yourself as well, just during the webinar portion?
Sure. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're totally fine. Just for background noise because we're recording.
Absolutely.
And then we're going to get to the question and answer session at the end, and everybody can unmute willy-nilly. Okay, so we're going to talk about gut health really quickly. So what the heck is it? So someone asked me the other day if this webinar was going to be super sciencey, and I promised them it wouldn't be. But I do feel like it's important to understand, the foundation of what's going on in your body, because I think sometimes not knowing makes it much easier for us to put off the effects or say, hey, I can eat this because it's not going to kill me now, like in the next 10 seconds, right? But if we actually start to understand how our choices affect our physiology, and we actually know just the most basic science behind it, it starts to become much more motivating then to make the right choices. So in my mind, knowledge is power. And so I included this slide. It's a little sciencey, but I just want to explain the foundation here of gut health really quickly. So if you notice these yellow cells here, those are called epithelial cells. And so that's a lining that you have in your gut. So you have this tube basically that starts at your mouth, goes down to your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, your colon, and then your anus, right? And so we often think that our intestines and our gut, that long tube, is inside of us. But actually, it's a tube that protects the real inside of our bodies from the outside environment. And so that's kind of a different way to think about it. But your gut is there's this layer of cells called epithelial cells that line this mucosal lining here that protects your body, the inside of your body, from everything that we don't want to be exposed to. That includes food proteins that haven't been broken down, toxins, chemicals, whatever it is that your body doesn't want to get into your bloodstream. This is your physical barrier there that protects you. So you see the epithelial cell layers there. Well, there are these little bridges in between connecting those cells, and those are called tight junction. So these bridges, if you've ever been like on a lake where they have the bridges that can open up and close depending on, when the barges come by and they need more room, this is kind of what those tight junctions are like. Your intestines, your gut should be permeable in terms of those bridges can move up and down and open up and let things pass, but it's very specific when we want that to happen. So when this becomes a problem is if we're eating things or we're exposed to things that actually cause damage to those tight junctions. And then we have these openings in between those epithelial cells where then particles and chemicals and toxins are getting through and potentially into our bloodstream that we do not want. So there is some sort of permeability, some level of permeability where your body controls and regulates itself that is healthy. But then when there's damage that is occurring, it becomes hyperpermeable and it's not under control. That's when it's a problem. So the little fingers that you see on top of those cells, those are called villi and microvilli, and those have two main purposes. That's for absorption of nutrients into your bloodstream, but also gut motility. Those little fingers kind of wave around and keep things going in your intestines, which is really, really important. And as you can see in this picture, it's a really great picture. Underneath that cell lining, you have tons of immune system cells. So about 70% of your immune system lives in your gut, and this is where it's doing its thing. And so if those tight junctions begin to get damaged or broken, or the villi become blunted, or even the cell itself becomes permeable, as you can imagine, that's going to begin to let certain things, certain toxins, it's sort of your natural body's defense system, and now it's broken. And that becomes an issue because it's allowing these things to come in, and you can see your immune system's going to react there. But if there's too much of that going on, what happens? If it gets past the immune system, it's getting into the bloodstream, and that can become a real issue. Okay, so just as an example of that, there are some bacteria that live in the intestines that are fine, that are not going to hurt you if they're in your intestines. But if you have this hyperpermeability going on, and that bacteria then gets into your bloodstream, it can cause a significant issue and some serious infections. So again, certain foods, chemicals, and toxins are actually known to cause this damage. So there are certain foods that we can eat that do cause issues with this gut lining. They do cause inflammation. And then of course your immune system, like you can see in this picture, mounts the response. And if this happens over a prolonged period of time, you're going to develop hyperpermeability in your gut lining. And this is commonly recognized as leaky gut. So if you've ever wondered what the heck is leaky gut, that's what it is. So if you want to take a look at that picture there, it's pretty great in terms of describing it. Damaged area, you have the damage going on, you have the opening of the tight junctions there. Once the tight junctions are open, things can cross that barrier. What leaks into the body encounters the immune system, and then sometimes it gets into the bloodstream as well. So this can be a problem because leaky gut can cause a whole slew of symptoms. And if you look on this page here, I mean, there's a huge list. But I like the Dr. Axe picture there at the bottom, because some of the most common things that I see with people are kind of listed here. So a lot of women I know struggle with anxiety and depression. Believe it or not, leaky gut is one of the first things that you think of when you talk about moodiness and becoming a little depressed or struggling with anxiety. And, I spent that 2-week period in extreme anxiety and panic attacks, and I couldn't sleep. And I know 100% that there was so much going on in my gut at that time. Sinus infections are really, really common for people that have leaky gut. So if you kind of look, obviously, if you look in the colon section, that's normally what we think about when we think about gut health, right? I'm fluctuating between constipation or diarrhea. I have IBD or I have stomach issues, but there's so much more in terms of how your gut affects your body. It's not just what we typically think of as digestive issues. It can affect your brain. It can affect your hormones. It can affect all that. You can see the whole list up there. There's some autoimmune conditions. Actually, that's a really important one that I wanted to bring up, because if you have an autoimmune condition, leaky gut has been shown to be a precursor. There are several things that have to sort of happen in conjunction in order for an autoimmune condition to officially develop. And one of them is that every single person that has one does also have a leaky gut. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you have been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, healing your gut is absolutely primary, and it's absolutely important. So when you talk about, this little cycle here, what you're seeing is you get some damage to that gut lining. You begin to get, hyperpermeability to that cell wall, some damage to those cells. This mounts your immune system response and an inflammatory reaction, which then, of course, provides a perfect environment for bacterial overgrowth, food sensitivities, pathogens, things like that. So if you've ever, struggled with yeast overgrowth or candida or SIBO, or if you've ever been, had a stool test done, you've seen a parasite, things like that, food intolerances and pathogens, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where one is present, the other is usually likely as well, because they provide like this perfect environment in that gut lining for the other to thrive. And then of course you have symptoms, and once this process has gone on for a long period of time, that is when you end up getting disease. And so one thing about symptoms is typically they show up long after the initial triggers started building up in your body. Your body is such a survival machine that by the time you start understanding that something's actually going on, it's probably been there for quite a while. So if you think about it in a little bit of a different way, we just talked about the progression of leaky gut in terms of inflammation and damage, and then finally getting symptoms. But if you think about the progression of disease itself, if you kind of pull back and look at the big picture, when you reverse engineer disease, it's almost always the same process regardless of the disease. So whether we're talking about something major like Alzheimer's, or we're talking about something, you know, like autoimmune disease or PMS even, you have the issue at the end. And when you start reversing and looking back and saying, reverse engineer this, where did it come from? What can I do? There's chronic inflammation in the body across the board. Any disease, there's chronic inflammation somewhere. It may be showing up in different areas, but there's chronic inflammation. And when you look back and say, well, where did this chronic inflammation begin? Well, typically chronic inflammation begins in the gut, because that is the border that protects your immune system. That is where a lot of the inflammation starts, is right there in your gut. So then you go, well, what causes damage to my gut? Well, stress and everything that we're going to talk about in today's webinar. And so that is just something really important to think about when you're talking about, well, how do I prevent disease? How do I stay healthy? How do I heal my gut? It's all connected. So what the heck do hormones and the gut have to do? Well, we've already established like the gut has a lot to do with anything, right? It has a lot to do with your brain. It has a lot to do with your skin. It has a lot to do with your hormones. But what's really interesting is you've probably heard about this gut-brain axis, right? This gut-brain connection. A lot of people refer to your gut as actually the first brain or the second brain because it's so critical in terms of the signals that it's sending to your body. So your brain and your gut send signals back and forth. They're in constant communication. But what's really fascinating, because we so often think that our brain is in charge of things, right? In reality, our gut actually sends more signals to our brain. And so we have this constant communication here going on. And then your brain is what signals the release of hormones. So it's this whole body, whole world, whole life connection where they're all interconnected, and the health of your gut is so crucially important into maintaining the health of your moods, maintaining the health of your hormones. And I thought that was a little funny little cartoon. Look, I know this sounds crazy, baby, but I feel like we have a real connection here. They always say, trust your gut. So like I said earlier, hormone imbalances are almost always secondary. And that's one of the things that really fascinated me, because my initial story was, I think there's something wrong with my hormones. And so for a while, I really dug into hormones, and I thought hormones were the answer, right? And sure enough, I did have a ton of hormone imbalances that I needed to work on. But what I realized as I began to study and learn about the body is that hormone imbalances are almost always secondary. So when your body is focusing on an underlying condition, or maybe we can put it another way, when your body feels unsafe in any way, in any capacity, its priority is to keep you alive. And that's one of the things that your body is really, really good at, keeping you alive. And so your gut microbiome, all those good bugs in your, we eat probiotics, we know they're good for us. All those good gut bugs, they have an impact on your hormone regulation. So when they're imbalanced, it can be a problem. Leaky gut, like we said, causes inflammation, and that's considered a stress on your body. And what your body does is it interprets mental, emotional, and physical stress the exact same way. It only knows one type of stress. It doesn't matter how we interpret it. It matters that our body understands it as stress. And when you are stressed for long periods of time, this can cause a breakdown in your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, which is what controls your hormone release of your stress hormones and your sex hormones and things like that. So unfortunately for us, like I said, when your body feels unsafe, its priority is to keep you alive. Unfortunately for us, fertility ability and fat loss, are not the number one priority when our body thinks it's stressed out. So our body then puts digestion and fertility ability on the back burner, because carrying a baby, isn't as important as putting out this fire over here. If you have an infection, that takes priority. If this is going on, that takes priority. So why is hormone balance important? I mean, I think we all can pick out probably one thing on this list that we've struggled with. And so hormone balance is absolutely critical for fertility ability. To have or I guess I should say not have PMS. That's one of those things that I say, is common but not normal. If your body is functioning properly and you have the right hormone ratios, you should be able to have your period without, these crazy mood swings, without painful cramping, without all of these things, without, you should be able to maintain energy and live your life throughout PMS. But for so many of us that have experienced debilitating PMS, something's off there. Mood swings, fatigue, blood sugar instability. You can just go down that list. I put man boobs on there. I know it's probably all women on this call, but that's definitely a hormone imbalance there. Disease can be caused by hormone imbalance as well. Now, typically that's in the case of excess hormone. So for example, if you have, estrogen dominance and you just have a ton of estrogen flowing through your body, and that's been related to breast cancers and things like that. But, it's not just about having enough hormones, because I know maybe some of you have taken hormone tests and you're completely depleted like I was. I had like none of anything. It's kind of like, how was I functioning? It was kind of crazy. But the ratios between the hormones are also really, really important. So, for example, a woman doesn't want to be testosterone dominant, right? And there are certain balances between the hormones like progesterone and estrogen that are really, really critical for you to, for example, not have PMS and things like that. For a man, obviously he wouldn't want to be estrogen dominant. That's when he's going to get those man boobs and things like that. So let's just touch on a couple of those really, really quickly here. So estrogen dominance can be related to PCOS, water retention, moodiness, heavy bleeding, thyroid problems, blood sugar issues, and histamine intolerance. Progesterone, and that's just to name a few. Progesterone deficiency, PMS, cramping, infertility, irregular cycles, weight gain, osteoporosis, insomnia, depression, low libido, and anxiety. So one of the things that is really important here to note is you can be, like looking at these two pictures at the bottom of the screen, you can be estrogen dominant in a strong way or a subtle way. So even, like I said earlier, even if both of your hormones are very, very low, like let's say you are, bottom lining and you're in the postmenopausal phase, which is the purple into the purple dot there on the chart to the star, that's like postmenopausal range, and the star to the star range, the yellow star to the yellow star, left to the right, that is the range for someone who has not been through menopause. Okay, so typically if you're a younger woman, you want your levels to be falling in the middle of those, and if you're a postmenopausal woman, you want your ranges to be falling between the purple dot and the yellow star on the left side. So let's say, like me, you're falling super low in your early 20s. You can still, even if your hormones are super low, you can still have an issue in the ratios of these hormones, which can also, again, cause a lot of issues. So here in those pictures, you can see estrogen dominance in both of them, but one is more extreme, as you see there on the left, and one is more minor, but it can still cause some pretty significant issues when they are imbalanced like that. So we know that gut health is important, right? We've established why that's important. We've established that hormone balance is critically important. We know, come on, ladies, we just know it's important for our sanity. Everybody knows that hormones are important for our moods. So let's learn about, what is it that affects those? So we're going to talk about 3 major stressors. So today, there's so many things that can affect your hormones and your gut health, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to narrow it down to 3 things: stress, toxins, and inflammation. So each of these can sort of be its own hour-long webinar, so I'm going to try to keep it short here and just kind of touch on each point really briefly. But as we kind of go through it, you're also going to realize that they sort of all overlap each other: stress, toxins, and inflammation. They kind of all commingle and work together. So you'll kind of see that as we talk through it. So stress is really anything that can cause mental, emotional, or even physical stress. Like I said earlier, your body interprets it all the exact same way. So, we have new job situation, NSAID. So if someone's taking a lot of over-the-counter medication for whatever reason, heartburn medication, Tylenol, things like that, those can be stressors on the body. Infections, obviously physical infections, relationship stressors, work stressors, a move, worry, anxiety, and so emotional stressors. What's really, really interesting is the study of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the expression of our genes. And one thing that's really important to know is that if you have a certain gene, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to express itself or it's going to act. So we're becoming more and more aware of things like the MTHFR gene and all these other genes that can cause problems, right? Well, 23andMe is a really popular genetic testing that you can get online. And so a lot of people are running out and getting these genetic tests, and they're saying, oh my gosh, I have this genetic predisposition, I'm doomed, I'm gonna have this issue or this disease. That's not necessarily true. Epigenetics is a study that you have genes, yes, but there's 95% of the expression of them is in our control because it's determined by our thoughts, our lifestyle, and our nutrition, like our actions, basically. But what's really, really interesting, and the reason I brought this up is because we're talking here about stress, it being the mental, emotional aspect of it. With epigenetics, is really interesting is that your thoughts can affect your physical reactions, and it's not even reality necessarily, it's how you perceive reality. So you could be in a totally calm environment, but if you are perceiving it as stressful, your body is going to respond that way. And so when you're talking about gene expression, it's really important to not only work on these external life factors and what you're putting in your mouth, but also how you view the world. How do you perceive situations? Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? All of those things can affect how your genes express themselves, which is really, really interesting. So I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, so stress can be mental, physical, emotional. Poor lifestyle habits is a huge one. So making sure you're taking care of yourself and you're prioritizing a healthy lifestyle. Under eating is a huge one. I wanted to touch on that specifically because I think that's one that a lot of women struggle with, and they don't typically think of that as a stressor, but it absolutely is. So your body needs nutrients. It needs certain macronutrients. It needs all the macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, but it needs enough of them in order to produce hormones, to regulate hormones. Fun fact, your sex hormones are a derivative of cholesterol. So the whole thing in like the 80s to, skip the egg yolk and just eat egg whites, and all these bodybuilders are just eating egg whites and all these kinds of things. You're not eating cholesterol. Well, when you don't eat cholesterol, your body actually produces cholesterol itself. And so it's one of those really interesting reactions where if it doesn't get it from your food and from your nutrition, it produces more. So actually by not eating cholesterol, you can actually do the opposite of what you're trying to do and increase your cholesterol, because your body will say it essentially thinks you're starving it from this nutrient, and so it goes into overdrive. So that's kind of a fun fact. But yeah, so most of your sex hormones are derivatives of cholesterol, which is kind of an interesting little tidbit. The second thing here that I wanted to talk about are toxins. So toxins are an issue for so many reasons, but they're an issue for your gut health because things like pesticides can negatively affect your good gut bacteria. So, obviously we talked about gut health at the beginning. The balance of the good and bad gut bacteria is really, really important. And whenever you take something into your body, like maybe an antibiotic or an NSAID, or you get exposed to a pesticide or some sort of toxin, that can affect or suppress any of that good bacteria, that's when the bad bacteria take over. And we need both, and they should live in this nice balance. But what happens is the bad bacteria are called bad because when the good are squished, the bad become opportunistic and overgrow. And when that happens, that's when you get symptoms. So xenoestrogens are another thing to think about when you're thinking about toxins. So xenoestrogens are estrogen-like substances that are found in the environment. And so these are things that are commonly found in cleaning products and makeup and things like that. So, we have all of these things that we do in our daily regimens that can be affecting our hormones. And obviously xenoestrogens, if they mimic your hormones and you have a hormone imbalance, or you start getting exposed to these on a regular basis, they can be absorbed into your body and then affect your hormone balance as well. Things like deodorant, you're putting if you have an antiperspirant, you're probably putting aluminum into your body every single day. And that's something that has been linked to lots of diseases, including Alzheimer's, so your brain health. And, I recently did a podcast with Stephanie Lacuna, and she was talking about toxins and avoiding toxins. And the point she made is, where are you putting this aluminum? You're putting it directly next to your breast, right into your lymph system. So that's something to consider as well. So we're exposed to a lot of toxins on a regular basis. I mean, if you go down this list, I can probably check off every single thing on that list at one point in my life. And probably even up to 2-3 years ago, all of those would have been in my life to some extent or another. So it just involves, making different switches. And we're going to talk about that in a little while. The third major stressor is inflammation. So now, as you can see, stress and toxins falls within. Like I said, a lot of these are overlapping. They're sort of, working together in terms of this burden, this toxic burden of stress that your body is trying to handle before you get symptoms. But nutrition and pathogens really play a big part in the level of your body's inflammation. And what's really awesome is that those are things that you can control and you can work on. So food sensitivities create, and pathogens, like I said earlier, they create this inflammatory environment where they really can disrupt your body's ability to regulate hormones, but they also provide the perfect environment for each other. So typically where there's one, there's probably the other. Not necessarily they have a parasite or anything like that, but if you have a lot of food sensitivities, you probably have some bacterial imbalances going on, maybe some yeast overgrowth, vice versa. If you have some bacterial imbalances, you probably have a food sensitivity or two, because it's just causing all that damage, inflammation. Interestingly enough, when I looked up this fun little graphic here, a lot of those have showed up on tests I've run for my clients. So you see Pseudomonas there, Streptococcus, Klebsiella pneumonia, Escherichia coli, Clostridium difficile. I've seen all of those. My son actually had C. diff, and we were able to eradicate it without any antibiotics whatsoever, which is pretty exciting, because if you've heard about C. diff, it's very antibiotic resistant. So, you can see that we're surrounded by things on a daily basis that can cause disruption, not only to our gut lining, but then, of course, to our natural hormone rhythms as well. So what happens when, when we're surrounded by all these toxins and stressors and inflammation in our body? Well, a lot of the big hitters, right? We have a lot of the big hitters that our body breaks down. We're so familiar and we're so focused on things like obesity and diabetes and Alzheimer's, and we're so familiar with researching those and throwing a lot of money at them. But where I come in is typically when people are struggling with these, so-called smaller chronic conditions, because these are things that the doctors usually push off as not important, or a lot of times people don't get a diagnosis, or it's just considered part of aging or part of life that you get fatigue or bloating or gas. Many women that start to feel run down and start to feel, just like something isn't right. They'll go to their physicians, and often it's either go on the pill, go on an antidepressant, or nothing's wrong with you. So the fallout of all of these stressors and toxins and things like that can be all of these seemingly small things that build up. Gas, bloating, constipation, autoimmune conditions, brain fog, weight gain, weight loss resistant, IBS, low libido is a huge one, PCOS, and things like that. So this is the most important part, you guys, what can we do about it? So the good news, because there is good news, is that many of the biggest stressors, the heaviest hitters, the things that affect us the most and cause the most damage are actually things that we have total control over. And the goal here really isn't to be perfect, but it's to control as many of the stressors as we can, so that our body then is not overloaded. So whatever stressors that we cannot control, our body can then handle. Our liver does an amazing job detoxifying 365 days of the year. But when we are overburdening it, it can only do so much. So there's a lot of things that we can do. One of the first things that we can do is we can control what we put in our mouth. And this is one of the things that has the most impact of anything. Not because it's not only that you are lowering the inflammation burden, you are lowering the toxic burden, but with your nutrition, you're also doing something incredibly important by giving your body the nutrients it needs to then take care of everything else. You're supporting your liver, you're supporting your digestion, you're supporting your cell health. So it's kind of a two-part. You're eliminating some of the bad, but you're also producing a lot of good when you're focusing on your nutrition. So what do you want to do with your nutrition? You really want to focus on natural, pesticide-free, organic produce as much as you can. Pasture-raised poultry, grass-fed meats. Here's some things that I would prioritize. So when you're talking about red meat, you want to choose 100% grass-fed. So this is sort of an interesting distinction here. I actually just learned this about a month ago or so. I was surprised. Sometimes the labels will trick you. And so we're very used to thinking pasture-raised means that they're raised on a pasture. It's a very healthy situation. But with red meat, when you're talking about cows and things like that, 100% grass-fed is actually the gold standard. That means that they really truly are grass-fed 100% of the time. When it says pasture raised, they may be grass-fed for most of their lives, but they have the ability to be, their food can be substituted with grains or things like that, whether they're grain finished or there's some grains that come in the winter or whatever it is. Pasture raised is not considered the gold standard. 100% grass-fed is the most gold standard that you can get. And what's really awesome, you guys, even since I started doing this about 5 years ago, it's so much easier to go to the grocery store and find all these things than it was even 5 years ago. Poultry and eggs. Now here's where it gets confusing. Poultry and eggs, pasture raised is the gold standard. So when you're talking about free range, we actually don't want free range. If you're talking about really wanting the healthiest omega-3, as much omega-3 as you can get versus omega-6. If you're talking about the health of the chickens and actually letting them roam free, then you want to get pasture-raised eggs. So if you're talking about free range, unfortunately, and that would be mostly up to the conscience of the farmer at that point, but unfortunately that can also mean that they're really only the doors are open, they're allowed to go out if they want to, and then they're closed, and so but they're still held in the housing and all that. So pasture raised is the gold standard when it comes to poultry and eggs. Now poultry, fun fact, is a little higher in omega-6s than omega-3s. So, if you're dealing with inflammation and you are eating a ton of poultry, you may want to balance that out with some red meat, some grass-fed red meat. And again, grass-fed is higher in omega-3s than pasture-raised. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we want to focus on these. You want to get those good anti-inflammatory omega-3s. And when you choose healthy, well-fed meats, that's going to be helpful as well. Organic produce. So if organic produce is an issue in terms of cost, because it does go up just a little bit, but produce is also one of the most inexpensive things you can purchase. So if 70% of your cart is organic produce, you may actually find, even though it's organic, that your grocery bill goes down or evens out versus being more expensive. But if it is an issue, prioritizing the dirty dozen, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to give you some resources and some handouts at the end, and you can prioritize those to save some money. And then, of course, wild-caught seafood. The second thing that we can do, is research our skincare and makeup. So this is something that absolutely can take some time, you guys. It's not going to be perfect. We're still in the process of making changes and things like that. But home cleaning products and deodorant, I think if I had to pick one thing in terms of, skincare, makeup, and home care items, I think deodorant is probably the easiest and the fastest thing that you can switch out. There's so many healthy brands that you can try out there. But again, Stephanie Lacuna and I just did a podcast, I think it was last week, and she shared a ton of tips. If you guys don't know my podcast, it's the Tiny Fit Diva podcast, but she shared a lot of tips for eliminating toxins and going all natural and not being deceived by greenwashing, which is a lot of the labeling that I talked about. Sometimes reading labels gets a little tricky. So EWG is a really great resource, ewg.org, or you can go to their Healthy Living app. And what it does is it gives you ratings. And so that's really, really helpful. You can either put in a product that you have to see how it rates, or if you want to keep it simple and you just want to find, dish cleaning liquid, for example, you can type that in and they'll give you a list of what they, their top brands that they think are good and clean. And then, the last thing that I'm going to say in terms of, taking steps to calm the inflammation, de-stress your body is really, really take time to focus on de-stressing. But I like to always talk to my clients not only about de-stressing and controlling stress and anxiety, but it's the opposite. It's like the flip side of the coin there too. You actually want to bring in joy, right? You want to focus on things that make you laugh, that kind of get you in that headspace where you're not stressed out, you're not worried about things. You can just decompress, whether that's watching a funny movie or hanging out with girlfriends or whatever it is. But like I said earlier, when you're talking about epigenetics, it's really, really important to get into a mindset where you can be calm, where you can be happy, and where you're perceiving your environment in a positive way. I liked those little pictures because so often in our society, right, we're like, drink all the coffee, I have to be amazing, I have to be superwoman. And in reality, one of the best things that you can do for your body is to start eliminating those stressors and get enough sleep and prioritize rest and really just listen to what your body needs and respond. So then, of course, I like to throw this in there as well. When it's applicable, you know, if you've incorporated all lifestyle factors, you've changed your diet, you've worked on your stress, you've started eliminating toxins, you know, maybe everything that I've talked to you about so far is like, yeah, Kylene already knew that. I've been, you know, living this whole 30 lifestyle for like the past 10 years, and I have like aluminum-free deodorant, and I'm super hippy-dippy, but I still have issues, so thanks a lot for nothing. That's when I really encourage you to, you know, dive into further testing. I really began to see results and understand some of the underlying issues that I was having in my life when I dug into the testing. And so two of the tests I would recommend for anyone that's struggling with gut health and hormone imbalance would be the GI map, which is a stool test, and a Dutch test, which is a complete hormone panel. And the really interesting thing about the Dutch test is it shows, and you can kind of see here in this picture that I included, is you don't just see the levels of your hormones, you also see how they're metabolized. So if there is an issue with your liver, if there is an issue with detoxification, you're actually going to be able to see, like, how is your estrogen being metabolized? Is it going down the right pathway? Is it healthy? Or is it going down a potentially cancerous pathway or you know, an inflammatory pathway? And then you're going to be able to see there, you see the methylation pathway on the bottom left there. And so is your body able to eliminate the estrogen? So maybe they're going down all the right pathways, but your body isn't able to even eliminate it. And so then maybe you have some estrogen dominance, you have some issues detoxifying. So that test is really, really informative. The GI map is a stool test, and that's going to show us if you have any pathogens that are causing imbalances, that are causing inflammation, that's really hindering your body's ability to heal. And that has been a real game changer in my life, my family's life, and all of my clients. So that is kind of where I would start, you guys. I would start with nutrition. I would start with detoxifying your home and your life as much as possible, de-stressing. If those aren't things that you've done, just take those first few steps. But I also know that, you know, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to do it by yourself. It's hard to take. It's like, where the heck do I even start? And I know when I started making the changes, I felt the exact same way. So for those of you who are interested in further support, guidance, and encouragement through the process, that's why I designed my new program called Hormone Hacker. It's not intended to replace hormone therapy. It's not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Of course, I have to kind of throw that in there. But what it is here for is to give your body as much support through nutrition and lifestyle as possible. So I'm going to give you a brief rundown really quickly. Week 1, this is a 10-week program, by the way, so which might kind of seem intense, but, you know, change takes time and we need support through the process. So week 1 is really going to be learning all about gut health, what that means, how it impacts your hormones. We're going to go through the pantry. We're going to eliminate the junk. We're going to get to know others in the group, and you're going to set your intentions and goals for the next 10 weeks. So week 1 is kind of about getting your mind right, getting your house in order, and getting prepped to go. Weeks 2 through 5 is when we dig deep. So each week, you're going to systematically take another step in removing foods from your diet that cause inflammation and disrupt hormones. We're going to learn about those different foods and what they do to your body. You're going to learn how to read ingredient labels and identify common places that certain ingredients might be hiding. Some things have like 50 different names. And so that can be really tricky when you're trying to make a change and maybe you don't understand that you're still being exposed to something. So it's a process. You're going to get all the tools you need there. But in addition to removing certain foods that might cause inflammation or mess with your hormones, we're also going to be including, for every week that you take something out, we're going to bring something in that focuses on nutrient density, that focuses on healing your gut, or that focuses on specifically supporting your hormones and digestion. So you're going to learn all about those individual foods, their benefits, how to incorporate them, and we're all going to have fun experiencing new things. Week 6 is I'm going to talk a little bit more about nutrients and nutrient density. So how do you get them? What nutrients do you need? What foods do they come in? Do you need supplementation, or can you get it all from your food? So we're going to kind of dig into that in week 6. And while we're going through that, this is the time where you're going to start settling into all those nutritional changes that we did in weeks 2 through 5. And we're going to continue the progress there. Week 7 through 9, again, you're going to continue your nutritional changes, and this is giving you time to really settle into those habits. 7 to 9 is really your lifestyle weeks. So we're going to learn how to optimize your sleep. We're going to work on hacking your body's stress response to really get into rest and digest. We're going to, talk about meditation. Discover what level of exercise is right for you, whether it's not enough or maybe it's too much. And then, we're going to talk about emotional work because, like I've mentioned several times, your perception of the world and your perception of your environment and your level of stress is so, so important when it comes to healing your body. So, it's interesting. Someone made the comment the other day, what can't you digest emotionally? And that's I thought that was such an interesting point. If you are struggling digesting something emotionally, that can turn into the exact same effect in your body. And so that's a really important thing to kind of identify some mental stressors, some mental blocks, and kind of work through those as well. Week 10 is going to be troubleshooting week. So you've put in the work. You have 9 weeks of really settling in, changing your nutrition, seeing results, working on your lifestyle. And week 10 is sort of that final week to discuss any barriers that you may still have. There's going to be some question and answer sessions, and it's sort of the what next, what now? Where do I go from here? How do I maintain this? Or if I haven't seen the results that I want, where do I go from here? And that's going to be week 10. So there are some additional things that are included in the program as well. You're going to receive 4 weeks of recipes and suggested menus. They're going to be all listed out. You don't have to follow them 100%, but you will be provided with all the tools that you need. So you will have menus, you will have recipes provided. And if you want to follow them exactly, you can absolutely do that. And there will be 4 weeks. And the reason that I am only providing 4 weeks is because I do want to help you, but I don't want to enable you. So I want to give you all the tools and all the resources in order for you to be successful, but then I want you to learn how to do it yourself. So after weeks 2 through 5, after you've gotten all those resources, it's going to be your turn to start incorporating the tools that you've learned, start incorporating the foods that we have talked about, and then still use the group for support, for ideas, for questions, and for encouragement along the way. You're going to get a lot of PDFs about the topics we talk about. So by the end of the program, you can have this awesome binder where you have all these tools. You have recipes, you have menus, you have PDFs, anything that we talk about in terms of, hey, we're talking about this food this week. You're going to get a little PDF that goes into all the details that we talk about. And so you'll be able to print those off and have a resource for life. Then there are going to be live videos and webinars throughout. So they are set dates that you can put on your calendar and you can meet up with me. They're going to talk about what's coming up. So if you have homework, if we're talking about, hey, it's time to pull out this food and introduce this food, etc. Those are the things we're going to be talking about in those webinars. They're also an opportunity, if you're hitting any roadblocks, to touch base with me and to ask any questions that you may have. So lots of live videos, lots of connection, lots of support. In addition to all of the resources in the group, you have the ability to work with me and get some upgraded testing. So if you want to get the Dutch test, if you wanted to do the GI map, you absolutely have that ability as part of the group. And so some people choose to go through these groups and just get all the tools and resources, recipes. And some people are like, nope, I'm ready to get a personalized protocol. And that's what I do. When I work with you as a client and you get some one-on-one testing done, then I create a personalized protocol that's very, very specific for you and your life. So guys, thank you so much for being here. Okay, so we're gonna get into the giveaways in just a second and the Q&As in just a minute, but that is the Hormone Hacker Program, 10 weeks, lots of support, lots of information. I'm super pumped to drop it and release it for you guys. But I wanted to thank you for being on the webinar today. So first of all, anyone who joined me today at all, who's still on, thank you so much for spending your morning with me. I really appreciate it. And if for anyone that's on the webinar at all, I have several PDFs that I want to give you in terms of these are action steps that you can take regarding things that we have talked about on the webinar. So you're going to get a dirty dozen list so that you can start prioritizing which vegetables to buy organic. You're going to get a healthy home checklist. So this is just going to, it's like a little checklist that you can go through your home, and then it has suggestions of switches that you can make as well. And then I also have a PDF that I'm going to give you for avoiding pesticides. So for anyone that is live that still wants to get these, just go ahead and when you get a chance, get onto the event and private message me your email, and I will go ahead and send all of those resources to you. Now, for anyone that is interested in signing up for the Hormone Hacker Program, it officially opens September 2nd. That is our go date. So I'll be loading everyone into the Facebook group the week prior, so the very end of August, and we're going to be done by the first week of November. So you guys are going to have all the tools you need before Thanksgiving. We will be done in plenty of time before the stress of the holidays. But for anybody who's interested, if you guys have questions, please let me know. But you're gonna get every thing that I mentioned above, so all those PDFs. You're also gonna get $100 off the course tonight. So if you go before tonight and you sign up at the tinyfitdiva.com/shop/hormonehacker, the cost for the 10 weeks is only gonna be $147. That's huge, you guys, that's huge. So $147 for 10 weeks, that's like $14 a week. Did I do the math there? Is that right? Is that accurate? Okay, don't judge me if it's not. You're gonna also get a few extra PDFs. You're gonna get guide to cleaners. So when you're talking about home cleaners, you're gonna get guide to safer cosmetics. And then I have 2 guides that I've created as well, 5 steps to crush your PMS and 5 steps to your best sleep ever. So that you can start incorporating some of these things before we even get started. So if anybody has any questions, now is the time. I'm gonna pull up the, I'm gonna pull up the question thing here, see if maybe, oh, actually, someone asked me a question the other day, and so I wanted to address that really quickly. I'm going to, here we go. Whoops, here we go. Sorry, I'm trying to, there we go. Okay, so I wanted to address this question really quickly. It was sent in the other day, and the question was, I lost my menstrual cycle when I started eating really healthy and working out 30 minutes a day. I was always a really healthy BMI, but still couldn't cycle until I completely cut out exercising and gained weight. I felt awful, but finally got my cycle. It was irregular, and I needed Clomid to conceive. I would love to get my cycle back naturally for the next one. What am I doing wrong? So that's a woohoo, that's a really intense question. So first of all, I wanted to say, and I should have said this at the beginning, I'm not a medical practitioner. I cannot diagnose or treat any medical conditions. However, what this does bring up for me is a lot of questions, but I did have a lot of thoughts. So the first thing I would say is, what does healthy eating mean? Because for everybody that's different, and everybody, I have a hashtag called Youtrition. It's very, very important to find what foods your body actually responds to. You may be eating something that's healthy for one person that's causing a lot of inflammation to you. Now, there are some general rules that sort of apply to a lot of different people in terms of what foods you may eliminate. But, you know, just to throw it out there, blueberries might be inflammatory for you. So kind of digging in and figuring out the foods that are right for your body. Also, a lot of people say healthy, and healthy can often mean, and I mentioned this in one of the slides, a lot of women undereat. So a lot of women will be like, hey, I'm eating like 1,200 calories a day or something like that, and I'm trying to get pregnant. I don't think so. You need food, okay? And it's also important to balance your macronutrients. So, you know, without knowing your exact situation, I can't really answer this question 100%, but were you eating the right carbohydrates and enough of them? You know, right now, keto is huge and high fat is huge, but women really, really need carbohydrates to support their hormones. And I would venture to say we need more carbohydrates than men generally. Healthy fats is extremely important for your hormones. Your hormones love healthy fats. So where you want a really, really low fat diet, thinking that that's healthy, that could have potentially been a problem. Do you have or have you ever been diagnosed with PCOS? Women that have PCOS, typically they will struggle with insulin resistance, and they will tend to be more androgenic as well. And some of those things can make it difficult to conceive. Workouts, you had mentioned working out and needing to gain weight. If your body fat percentage is too low, that can absolutely have an impact on your hormone levels. And then again, anything that we talked about in the webinar today, if there's some just toxic burden in your body, if there's a pathogen going on that's disrupting your natural flow, your natural balance, I would need more information, but I hope that maybe that kind of helped. And I'm absolutely willing to talk to you later as well if you want to hop on and chat more about that. But I hope that gave you a little bit of information. I have another question here. Can you repeat what you said about omegas and poultry eggs versus red meat? Yes. So omega-6s and omega-3s, that's something that's really important to consider when you're talking about wanting to control inflammation in the body. And so omega-6s are considered more highly inflammatory, and omega-3s are considered to be anti-inflammatory. So in the standard American diet, you're getting exposed to a ton of omega-6s. Typically, you're getting that from fried foods, from going out to eat, from vegetable oils like canola and sunflower and things like that. So we want to generally avoid those. So omega-3s are usually found in seafood and things like that, and some walnuts and all sorts of things like that, flaxseed, chia seeds. But when you're talking specifically about red meat and poultry, let's talk about red meat really quickly. So red meat, if it is grass-fed, it's going to have more omega-6s, or I'm sorry, if it's grain-fed, it's going to have more omega-6s than if it's grass-fed. If it's raised the way it was like designed to be raised, which is in a field eating grass, it produces more omega-3s, and so red meat then it becomes less inflammatory. If you're talking about poultry in general tends to be higher in omega-6s, but you want to choose pasture raised to get the healthiest version. So I hope that answered your question. But yes, poultry does tend to be higher in omega-6s, even if it's fed the perfect diet and lives the perfect life. So that's something to consider if you are someone that eats chicken like every single day and you never have any red meat. Besides the fact that red meat provides so many other nutrients, don't get me started on beef liver, you guys. I just love my beef liver. So good for you. Okay, I think I have some other questions here. Let's see. I should have seen these earlier. I see your lips moving, but no sound. I hope that was resolved an hour ago. Let's see. Thank you for learning all this information. I've been learning about gut health for a while now. Oh, I'm so glad. You're so welcome. Can you have the Dutch test if you currently have the Mirena IUD? You can, and it would give you a snapshot of how things are being processed in your body. So there's a lot of information that you can get from the Dutch test. You're going to get your cortisol levels. You're going to get all of your sex hormones, which would be affected from the Mirena if, I believe that's the one that outputs some hormones, if I'm correct. So that would absolutely affect, the levels, and they're probably going to be suppressed because usually what birth control does is prevent ovulation. So the numbers would be affected, but you can still get a lot of good information in terms of how are they being processed in your body, like what you do have, how is it being shuttled out? Like we saw in that one picture, how is your liver functioning? Is your body able to excrete it and things like that? And I will put a caveat to this, you guys. I do not like to offer the Dutch test without a GI map because, like I said so many times today, hormones are always secondary. So if there is a problem that you want to research and you have to choose only one test, I would always recommend the stool test, just because whatever shows up on the Dutch test, if there's a lot of imbalances and there's a lot of issues, my first question is going to be why? What's underlying? What's the stress? What's causing the inflammation? What's causing the issue? What's the burden here? And so the GI map then provides all of those answers and a lot more. So if it's in terms of budgeting, if you can only choose one, I would always go for the GI map. Because I've actually done that before where I allowed someone to just do the Dutch test and they couldn't ultimately afford the GI map, and so I wasn't able to dig as deep as I wanted to, and that made it very, very, very difficult. What deodorants are safer? I'm allergic to a lot of them. That is a great question. So I want to encourage you to do a lot of research on this one, particularly because I can give you my favorite deodorant, and I will in just a second, but everybody is chemically different. So the deodorant that I love may make you stink and vice versa. It took me a while to find a natural deodorant that I liked for my body. So I like Primal Pit Paste. You can go primalpitpaste.com, or I know that they sell them in Whole Foods. And that's like a baking soda one. It's got some baking soda. It's got some essential oils. It makes me smell good. It keeps me dry. Love it, love it, love it. And let me tell you something, you guys. For someone, if I can find a deodorant that works for me, you can too. When I went through puberty, I sweat, like I'm not even kidding, like patches through my clothes every single day. It didn't matter, you know, if I was sitting still and I was cold, I was sweating buckets. It was so incredibly disgusting. It was so gross. I would put, not even kidding, sanitary pads in my shirts to absorb it. Still didn't help. That's how much I sweat. It was incredibly gross. So after years of struggling with this, I was like, Mom, seriously, can you ask the doctor about this? So she got me like this prescription deodorant, which of course I'm sure blocked my pores and was horrible for me. But when I became an adult, I started getting nervous about getting off of that, right? Well, eventually it was fine. Whatever was the problem had balanced out. But then I was like hardcore antiperspirant. I would like turn it over and look at the level of aluminum in that sucker. And I would try to get like the highest amount because I knew that's what was going to stop me from sweating. So I even made the switch from all of that to totally natural. So if I can do it, you can do it. And I promise I don't sweat that much anymore. But I would say Primal Pit Paste. I've also heard, I think Primally Pure. You can just Google like natural deodorants. There's recipes. I mean, if you really want to go hardcore hippy dippy, you can do your own. But yes. But I would say definitely, like, if one doesn't work for you, don't give up. Google other brands, try other brands. Some people have issues with the baking soda, other people don't. Am I going to have a replay? I didn't think of inviting friends till you started. I know a few people who would be interested. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to post this replay. I'm actually thinking of doing a second webinar, maybe changing the topics a little bit in a couple weeks, so you can also invite them there. If you guys have anything that you want covered that like I didn't talk about, please just let me know. I've had the hardest time finding natural deodorant that'll work for me. I'm dealing with candida and overcoming adrenal fatigue. My body is still finding a good balance, so deodorant has been challenged. Yeah, so you might actually think about doing something like, what am I trying to say? Like a magnesium and charcoal detoxification paste that you can put under your armpits and sort of help your body detox naturally. That might be something to consider. But girl, yeah, if you have candida and adrenal fatigue and things like that, you're going to be, you know, your body is going to need some support. I'm happy to chat with you. I don't know where you are in your protocol if you're working with someone, but those are definitely things that absolutely can be fixed and reversed and helped as well and supported. So a couple more things here, guys, before we wrap up. If let's see, I just want to make sure there's not another question. So just a reminder, make sure you email me if you're on this and you want those handouts that are free. Make sure you email me. Just get online and shoot me your private email, or privately shoot me your email. And then just as a reminder, anybody who signs up today, if you go to the tinyfitdiva.com/shop/hormone-hacker, you're going to get $100 off the 10-week program. I'm really excited to start working with people. And I have a couple extra things for you as well before we wrap up. So anyone that invited friends today, when you send me your email, go ahead and let me know if anybody popped on. And whoever invited the most friends that showed up, I will send you. The winner is going to get this awesome mushroom coffee, which is super amazing. So I do typically, depending on like if you have adrenal fatigue or things like that, encourage that you sort of eliminate and eventually get rid of coffee. This is a nice little transitionary tool. It's half the caffeine. It's less acidic because of the mushrooms. It's got immune boosting properties because of the mushrooms. And this particular one's my favorite because the lion's mane is a nootropic. And so it helps your brain and helps you focus. So whoever invited friends, just let me know if, you know, how many showed up. Whoever had the most, I will gift this to you. And I'm also going to send this to the first 3 people that sign up today. So you're going to get $100 off. You're going to get all those PDFs. And then you're also going to get some fun, yummy mushroom coffee. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I don't think I see any more questions. You guys are awesome. If you have any other questions, please let me know. If you're interested in the next webinar and you'd like me to redo it with some other topics, please let me know. That'll probably show up in a couple weeks. But thank you again so much. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.